Guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. I did have a video planned for Halloween Day that I had planned on uploading for you guys. I know it's long past now, but the reason that video didn't go up is because the day that I was supposed to be filming, I fell down the stairs and spent the entire night in the hospital getting my foot x-rayed. Nothing was wrong with it. It was sprained. It still hurts kind of to walk, but it's completely fine. And then a bunch of other stuff kept happening and I didn't really get a chance to film. Also, I have kind of lost inspiration. Like, I can't find anything that is intriguing me enough to want to make a video about, but I've been really into UFOs and stuff like that lately after having my own UFO sighting, or what I believe was a UFO sighting. So I decided to take inspiration from that and make a video specifically on UFO sightings and alien abductions. Also, I have a little bit of a cold, so if I'm really sniffly or anything like that throughout today's video, this is the only time that I got to film. So even though I feel kind of like crap, I wanted to sit down and film for you guys today. So with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. So the first encounter that I want to talk about is known as the A70 incident, or the A70 encounter. I was surprised to come across this specific encounter because it isn't one that I have heard about absolutely at all in the past until doing a deep dive trying to find topics to discuss for today's video. And it's weird because I would think that this topic specifically would be one that would be more publicized and talked about, especially in the UFO and alien community. Anyways, this specific incident took place in Scotland on August 17th, 1992, nearing the Harpering Reservoir. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. To set the scene, an ambulance technician named Gary Wood and his friend Colin Wright were driving along the A70 between Edinburgh and Tarbax. Side note, please excuse my pronunciation throughout today's video. I am from Canada and I know that the pronunciation sometimes is completely off, but I am trying my absolute hardest. So if I'm saying things wrong, I do apologize, and I hope that you guys can still kind of get the gist of what I'm saying. The drive that these two were going on was one that was said to be pretty basic. They only should have been driving for about 30 minutes, and they were driving to this area to drop off a satellite to one of their buddies. During their entire drive, both men noted that there was little to no traffic around them during the entire 30 minutes of their drive, or what should have been 30 minutes of their drive. It's at this time that they were driving past the Harpering Reservoir when the two men noticed a two-tiered disco-shaped object that was hovering 20 feet above the road, with both men saying that what they had seen was definitely not an airplane or a helicopter or any aircraft that either of them had ever seen before. After noticing this, both men were overcome with this like fearful feeling of whatever these lights were that were hovering above them in the sky. So Gary locked all of the doors to the vehicle and started speeding really fast to get away from whatever these lights were. Suddenly, what they described as like this silver mist dropped down from this object and touched the vehicle, putting both men into a state of complete darkness. They were surrounded by nothing but dark. This only seemed to last for both of the men for a few seconds before they were returned back to the car and they had their sight come back or whatever. And Gary was still in the driver's seat speeding like a madman, which could have ended very badly, but luckily he was able to regain his control of the vehicle, and they did end up arriving safely at their buddy's house. When they arrived at their friend's house, they were both still really shaken up by the encounter that they had just had, as anybody would be. So they both got out of the vehicle and started frantically banging on their friend's door. And when the friend came to the door, he was also pretty alarmed, and he was questioning the men about where they had been, because they had arrived an hour and a half later than they should have if they just stuck to the route that they said that they had taken to get to this guy's house. The thing about this, however, is Gary and Colin both thought that they were right on time. They had no account for what was happening in the lost time, and there was no reason that they should have been that late. But both men just decided at this time to brush this off, and they got back in their vehicle and returned to Edinburgh. And they took a completely different route this time to avoid passing the reservoir, because obviously they were still frightened by what they had encountered the first time on their drive to this friend's house. Similar to other alien abduction stories that we've talked about on this channel, after this encounter, Gary started to have these very strange and horrific dreams. He also suffered from severe headaches, so bad actually to the point that he had to undergo a CT scan. However, the results from that CT scan turned up to be completely normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary that came out of these. Colin and Gary talked among themselves and came to the conclusion that both of them believed that something had happened to them that night during the time that they could not remember. And so among the two men, they decided that they both wanted to undergo hypnotherapy to see if they could pull from their subconscious memories that would give them answers to what happened during this missing time. A woman named Helen Wallers, who was a qualified hypnotherapist and psychic, had been called to help them regain their memories and get to the bottom of this entire thing. During the first session of this hypnotherapy, both men had two very different experiences. Colin seemed very calm and collected the entire time during the first session, whereas Gary seemed very, very distraught and upset. At one point, he even burst into tears. They continued to undergo these therapy sessions for several weeks, with each time regaining a little bit more memory of what had happened. Both men's bodies seemed to physically react to these memories. At some points, their bodies would jolt throughout trying to remember these things, and Gary recounted seeing all of these strange objects in his peripheral while driving the vehicle. And then some really strange stuff started to come out. Both men said that while they were driving during that lost time, they did remember that the car had been stopped for some reason. And at this point, even though the car doors were locked, they all began to open and 3 small entities crawled into the vehicle. After recounting this, Colin then also shared that he believed that after this had happened, he was led up a ramp by these entities into the ship that they had come down in, into a room that he said was round, and he was told to strip naked and sit on a curved chair. Gary said that he was also taken onto the ship and led into a round room as well. However, this room didn't have a curved chair. It had a flat like medical bed where he was also told to get completely naked. And both men say that they had medical procedures done on them. When Colin and Gary arrived home after this encounter, both men had found scars and bruising on their bodies that had previously not been there, and they could not account for. Both men have also completely stuck to the exact same story since day one, and have even passed lie detector tests on live television. And in a series of once classified British government documents in 2012, it was verified that this case was taken extremely seriously by the government, and it was even classified as an official encounter. This specific case is so insane to me because it reminds me a lot of the Barney and Betty Hill case, and you would think that you would hear more of it, especially because I feel like people's interest in UFO encounters and alien abductions have definitely gone up in the last few years. But I had never heard of this case before, and I would love to do a deeper dive into it because I just think that it is so fascinating. Since for today's video I was kind of doing a compilation of a bunch of alien encounters and UFO encounters, there was one specific encounter that I knew that I had to include in today's video, and that is an encounter that was had by a woman by the name of Barbara Lamb. For those of you who may want to look into her specific encounter a little bit more, the encounter is known as Barbara Lamb and the Lizard Man, and there isn't too much information on it. That's why I had to include it in a video like today where I couldn't just do a full deep dive on it, because I've looked into this case before and couldn't really find much information. But I do think personally that this is one of the most interesting alien encounters that has ever been shared. Barbara Lamb herself is a very intelligent woman. She is a psychiatrist and a family therapist, and at one point in her life she took interest in extraterrestrials, specifically crop circles and patterns that were found in cornfields and things like that, which often took place in England. I meant to share that Barbara herself is also from Claremont, California, so she lives in the States. She doesn't live anywhere near England. On top of being interested in studies of like UFOs and extraterrestrials and stuff, she was also studying regression therapy, treating personality disorders, and taking people back to their previous lives. One day, Barbara had her very own encounter with an extraterrestrial, and I'm going to describe this encounter as terrifying, but that is not how Barbara has described it ever. So basically, she was in her kitchen one day when all of a sudden she claimed that there was an extraterrestrial being that looked to her like a lizard man inside of her home. She said that the being was very tall and it had these piercing yellow eyes, and it kind of looked to her like a lizard. It was very tall. It appeared in her kitchen, and she said even though this creature looked scary, to her it was really welcoming and kind, and it gave her this kind of like warm, homey feeling. And when she reached out to touch the being, that is when it vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared. I'm going to read to you guys exactly what she had said her encounter was like in an interview, so that you get more of what she was saying and less of like my encounter of it or my recap of it. So I was walking through my home and there was standing this reptilian being. It was 3 in the afternoon. I was alert and awake. I was startled somebody was there. Ordinarily, Lamb said she was repulsed by snakes and lizards, but he was radiating such a nice feeling. I went over and had my hands out. He was taller than I, and she said he stood this close to me and held her hands to about a foot apart, and he had yellow reptile eyes. Then he was suddenly gone. She said she had recalled more of the encounter when a colleague had put her through hypnotic regression. He said telepathically, "Ha, Barbara, good. Now you know that we are actually real. We do exist and have contact with certain people." What seems strange to me about Barbara's encounter specifically is that people who have encounters with reptilians and things like that usually say that they're evil and they give you this like bad feeling, and they're like these bloodthirsty, creepy, unsettling creatures. But Barbara's experience and encounter with them seemed to be very, very pleasant, and she said that she wasn't scared, so that just seemed interesting to me. But you guys are gonna have to let me know what you think specifically on Barbara's case, but obviously, like always, I want to know what you think about all of these cases. I'm going to talk about one more, and then I'm going to wrap this up because I'm starting to feel very, very crappy again. So the last case that I want to talk about for today's video is an experience that was had by a man by the name of Robert Matthews, who recounts this as just having strange experiences with missing time. This happened at 8:45 p.m. on October 1st, 1966, when a bus pulled up in front of Dutas Market in Cape Cod, north of Truro, and the only person to get off the bus was a 19-year-old Airman First Class Robert Matthews. Robert was reporting for his first tour of duty, but when he arrived to this area, he noticed that it was completely deserted. So he called back to his base and he told them that there was really nothing here, and so they told him that they would send a truck out to pick him up. And something to note is the base was very, very close by, about 5 minutes. Waiting for the truck to come and pick him up, that is when Robert noticed these strange lights moving around in the sky. He said that they were moving from left to right, and he noted that after seeing these lights, he felt an immense sense of fear by looking at them. Like, they really, really freaked him out. After seeing these lights and feeling this fear, Robert ran back to the phone to recall his base and asked them to, like, you know, hurry up. But when he got on the phone with them, he was shocked because the people who were on the other end of the line were asking him where he had been when he thought that he was in the same place the entire time. They said that they had sent a truck down immediately after getting off the phone the first time with Robert, and it had arrived about 5 minutes after Robert had made the phone call. However, when the truck got there, Robert was nowhere to be found, and it was now about an hour later at 9:45 p.m. when Robert was calling them back. This really shocked Robert and freaked him out immensely because he thought that the phone calls had only been made a couple minutes apart. When Robert arrived back at the base, he was questioned by several military men who were dressed in civilian clothes. They asked him about the lights that they had seen, and he had told them that he had never left the area where he had made the phone call, at least not to his memory. They were really hard on Robert and ended up dismissing his encounter, saying that he was lying and that they thought that he might have been drinking, and they just made him feel stupid. They didn't believe him. And eventually Robert was shipped off to Vietnam, but he never ever forgot about this encounter. The reason that this seemed to stick so strongly with Robert is because this wasn't the first encounter that Robert believed he had had with extraterrestrials. When he was about 5 or 6 years old, he saw a green glowing thing in his bedroom. Really frightened by this glowing green figure, and he tried to scream, but at this point he claimed that nothing came out, and suddenly he couldn't hear, see, or feel pretty much anything. He just went into complete darkness. Kind of similar to what Colin and Gary described happened to them during that last time in the first encounter that I shared. That this being that was in his room did something to his chest and then completely vanished. This was a lot for Robert to take in, and he told his mom, but she just dismissed this as a made-up story or her child's very dramatic imagination. In 1987, he came across Bud Hopkins' book Missing Time and became certain that he had an encounter with aliens. Later, he would go under hypnosis, describing his abduction and saying that he had been probed by these beings. personally feel so bad for Robert Matthews. I can only imagine how difficult it would be to come out with that kind of information to absolutely anybody, because you already think that they're going to dismiss it as you're crazy, you're this, you're that. And for him to come out and have these experiences twice and both times to be called a liar, I can't even imagine the emotional toll that that would have on you, going through something like this and then being dismissed as a liar. But guys, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Please, if you have any ideas, comment them down below, because I am so struggling with finding topics right now. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.